Right, okay, I'm proceeding. Okay, so second public announcement. Oh God, now this flipping thing's not working. Come on. Oh, there we I love technology. Okay, so yes, the eclipse is coming. So into the basement at about 2 o'clock Monday afternoon, everybody, with your toilet paper and your hand sanitizer, please. So I'm Mick Wilson. I'm running the show tonight. As you can see, I'm doing a very professional job. I'll do this introduction, a few of our normal announcements. I will speak to an upcoming event towards the end of the month, a hands-on telescope workshop. No, sorry, Andrea Jones will be joining us via Zoom to do that. We have quite extensive members in the news section. Dave Wagner, you here, Dave? Sorry, Rick. Rick Wagner. Going once, going twice, maybe he's not here yet. Then Dave Chisholm with his normal skies for the month, followed by his presentation on preparation for the eclipse. That'll be followed by a new speaker for us, Bojan Scepanovic, who's going to be talking about light amplification equipment that's used in astronomy. After the break, we then have Malcolm Loro, sort of following on from Jim Thompson's presentation a couple of months back on narrowband imaging, observation reports, the new look monthly observing challenges, and then the closing out set of announcements. Next meeting, we'll do the door prizes, and in the car park, there'll be a ritual sacrifice, both for the vernal equinox and to pray to the weather gods for good opportunities on Monday. So with all that, make this happen. Do a Picard on you. Okay, so yes, we are recording and broadcasting this through YouTube, so I'm the only one allowed to use colourful language. People who are online, if you are looking to pose questions to any of the speakers, including myself, use the Q&A. Don't raise your hand and try to think that anyone's going to pay attention to you. Anything you put in the chat box is visible to all, so be polite. 4 new members this month. So welcome to Robert, Michael, Pomona, and Wayne, and any of you in the audience. Okay. 31 new members since the start of 2024. Benefits of membership that those 4 lucky people can now take advantage of. Our fellow members, those walking, talking fonts of knowledge and experience are on tap, available to you as new members or even existing members to gain from those experiences and their knowledge, whether that be in visual observing, observational techniques, various types of technologies, and so on. It's all here. All the expertise is in this room and available online, so you can make the most of that. Physical resources, Ted Bean Loan Library, we've got, I think it's 150 odd telescopes in that collection now. They're free to members to borrow and evaluate, whether you're looking to buy your first telescope or binoculars or are looking to upgrade from an existing bit of kit to something more sophisticated. Borrow first, buy later. Freely available to members. Out the back here, we have the Stan Mott Media Library, nice collection of books, DVDs, and so on. Estelle, are you here? She's here. We'll have that open out the back here behind the curtains with the wizard after the program. Members also have access to our Fred Lossing Observatory out near Almont. It's a very nicely equipped setup with 4 or 5 now permanently mounted telescopes, including the 14-inch. So there's some nice kit out there, freely available to all members, sort of by appointment, and guests are welcome in the company of members. Another physical benefit, the RASC National runs an extensive series of certification programs for members. Again, it covers a wide range of areas in which to gain and demonstrate expertise, whether that's lunar observation all the way through to deep sky astrophotography. The Journal of RASC National is a bi-monthly publication of a more academic nature. That's part of your membership in the online version. You can subscribe at extra cost for a print version of that. The Observer's Handbook, ancient classic, still widely used and referred to all around the world. That's one of your benefits of membership. And thirdly, then there's our Astronotes, the RASC Ottawa newsletter produced each month by Doug Webster and sometimes even put online. Gordon Webster, God, I'm having it bad tonight. Yeah, him over there in the corner, who sometimes actually gets it online in the same month. So that's also handy. By the way, all Astronotes are published onto the website at www.ottawa.rasc.ca. Hi, Brian.
Can I, 1 second? Somebody left their lights on in the parking lot of Mazda 3, Delta Bravo Whiskey Hotel 003. A battery test. Okay, we announced it a little while ago.
Yeah, and there was an earlier meeting here, and so maybe someone from that other group left their car out there. All righty, Gordon Webster, my apologies. There is now also the Discord site. It's a number of channels that are available for informal, free-flowing chat on the normal range of astronomical topics, through visual observing through to astrophotography. That's a members-only site. It's not open to any sort of public interference or noise. And in joining up, you will be contacted by Andrea to establish your credentials. Cost of membership for a single regular user, it's a shade over $100 a year, $8 a month, not unreasonable. For families, again, it's near $100 plus a per head cost for each additional adult and youth. And for students under 25 or just youth in general under 21, it's a shade over $60 a year. And generally, it's good value for money. Is Andrea up for this, Chris?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. So I just wanted to mention this at this meeting because it is an event that's going to happen in April, weather permitting. We have permission to use the CARP site where normally we have star parties, and we're going to be having a telescope workshop. And essentially, we want to help our new members or members that have a new telescope or anybody who's really struggling with getting their equipment going. We have some very senior and experienced members who will be coming along and helping out. And we invite whoever needs help with their telescope, sign up. I'm probably going to be sending an email with a link, and you'll fill it out and you'll sign up, or you can come to the Discord and message me. Yeah, it's going to follow. So please sign up if you're interested, if you need help. It says members only, but honestly, if you have a friend you want to bring along as well, I'm sure we'd be happy to help you with your telescope and getting your astronomy journey on its way. So stand by, that will be coming up likely after the eclipse. So thank you, and hopefully we can see some of you there and set up your telescopes with you.
Okay, any questions for Andrea on that point? All righty, thanks, Andrea. Again. Okay. Members in the news, as I say, quite busy this month. Did someone suggest I shine the laser at Chris? I was. Oh, yeah. Told you I'm having trouble tonight. Okay, so members in the news, Gary Boyle did a session at the CTV last week, I believe it was, online interview for, sorry, real-time interview. informing on the still upcoming eclipse. Dave Chisholm, man in the corner here, over 1,500 kids, I believe, have benefited from Dave's outreach activities over the recent weeks. And he was covered in, where was it, CTV again this evening. Yes, so congratulations, Dave. That's... And then thirdly, slightly different note, the publication of the Astronomical Society of Japan carries a recent article amongst the authors of which Rick Wagner, who is now in the audience, I believe. Rick? Yeah. And I would love for you to, at some future point, a bit busy tonight, but some future point to actually explain your contribution to an article on structural changes in accretion disks around, I presume it's a stellar mass black hole. So, yes? Yeah. So, yeah, well done, Rick. And while we're here, Dave, are you doing the honours? I think that's appropriate as president. Because of COVID and other reasons, we've had quite a break from what used to be a series of recognitions given to members on reaching certain milestones in their contribution to RASC. So, Dave Chisholm, president of RASC Ottawa, tell us about Rick Wagner.
Well, I'm pleased to present Rick Wagner with the, I don't have it here, Chris, but, or do you have it with you? Oh, here it comes.
But it's not just me tonight.
Okay. So we have a 50-year membership medal. Wow. For Rick Wagner. He started when he was 3. So congratulations, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you. Okay, I'll point the laser this time. Sorry, Rick, before you go. Sorry, I should have kept you here. I believe you have a few words to offer on the passing of David Lane. Thanks.
You will have caught the hint from that. Anybody who's been involved at all in the RASC at the national level will have known Dave Lane for many years. I first met him in 1980 at my first GA, the Halifax GA, and talked with him at virtually every single GA since that I've attended. Dave was initially the astronomy technician and systems administrator for the Department of Physics and Astronomy at St. Mary's University and running the Bert Gaffney Observatory, and then eventually became the director of the observatory, retiring a few years ago. This was an old Ealing 16-inch, I think, which he ripped all the guts out of all the electronics, the motors and stuff, replaced it all, programmed it all, completely redesigned the thing. Hosted hundreds of community groups and school groups through the observatory. Because he had completely revamped the telescope, he was able to make it Twitter, Facebook, and email controlled. You could actually send an email to the telescope or a tweet and say, telescope, please observe such and such an object. And if it was impossible, it would even come back and say, I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that. Once he retired, he built himself his own little observatory, sort of a doghouse observatory with sensors on the outside. So when it was clear and dark out, it would actually open up, the telescope would pop up, observe all night, and in the morning it would close itself down. As far as I know, that's only the second Facebook, Twitter, and email controllable telescope in the world. He was an author on over 100 publications on variable stars, telescope operations, co-discovered 3 supernovae with Paul Gray, had an asteroid named after him. He was the author of the Earth-Centered Universe Planetarium program, which I still use today. Name me another program that's 30 years old and still usable you know, maintained, workable under new operating systems and so forth. It's unheard of practically. Of course, in the Halifax Center where he lived, he was, you know, filled all manner of positions in the executive president, many other positions. He was the national president for 2 terms and many other positions. He provided years of support to their IT infrastructure, to the email and list chat servers and so forth for the RASC. He won Ken Chilton Prize, the Chant Medal, Service Award, President's Award, Fellowship Award. And sure, I mean, that's all great, but it's because of who he was that he won those. And that was, to me, is what's more important. He was always generous with his time, worked hard, willing to put out hours and hours in support of his colleagues and friends, generous, happy to give or take advice on almost any subject. A couple of decades ago, he and his wife, Michelle, took up sailing. They owned several sailing yachts and raced them. And of course, donated countless hours to the St. Margaret Sailing Club. In January, David was awarded an honorary doctorate by St. Mary's University. Just recently, he and his wife made a major donation to St. Mary's University to found Starfinder, the David Lane Astronomy Outreach Program. And this is committed to assisting in astronomy education in Indigenous and underserved communities in Nova Scotia. David passed away from cancer on the 24th at age of only 60. I'm sure he had many years of good for us and for his family left in him if he hadn't been taken so soon. He's a great loss to all his friends, colleagues, the RASC, the whole world of amateur astronomy. And we extend our deepest sympathies to Michelle and his family, and we'll all miss him desperately. Thank you.
Very moving tribute, Rick. Thank you very much. And okay, David.
Okay, let's see what's happening in the Ottawa skies for April. It's a pretty boring month, isn't it? No, we got something happening on Monday. So in terms of the moon phases, obviously we have the new moon on April the 8th, and we have our full moon on April the 23rd. It's also known as the pink moon because that's the color of the wildflowers at this time of year. Of course, we have the partial solar eclipse, and I'm basically going to be showing this slide in my next presentation, so I'm going to skip quickly through that. Everybody knows it's this Monday. This is the timing in Kingston. Again, this will be in my presentation. At the time I put these slides together, I normally work on them 4 months in advance. I wasn't sure I was doing a presentation, but now I am. So I'll cover all this off. We have the Lyra's meteor shower, April 22nd and 23rd, best viewing after midnight. 23rd is a new moon, our full moon, so good luck with that. Sun, a rise and set. Something's happened with the formatting here. Anyways, basically the days are getting longer. Mercury is not visible, it's rising and setting with the sun. Venus is visible in the evening. Mars is visible before sunset towards the end of the month. Jupiter is visible in the early evening, and Saturn's visible before sunset towards the end of the month. Uranus is visible in the evening, and Neptune is visible before sunset and toward the end of the month. And this is the cartoon of the month. Is anything good on this month? I think there is. So I'm going to move on to my presentation then for the eclipse. Let me just grab my notes. So this is a presentation that I put together primarily for the school kids, but I've done it for some adult groups as well. So it may be at a bit of a lower level than some of the more technical talks here, but I think it's a good message. And bear with me here. I've got a bunch of props. I'm going to show you what I took the kids through. This week I did 4 different schools. All of them were full school programs. So basically the different grades sort of came through, and one school I did 8 presentations, another one they grouped the kids together. I finished up today. And so this is the presentation. So the RASC Ottawa Centre acknowledges the trust placed in us by our First Nations with our ancestral lands and skies. So when I'm talking to the kids, I say, what is a solar eclipse? And most of them seem to know the answer, which is great. And what I explain is that the moon, as it goes around the earth, it does not go in a perfect circle. It follows an ellipse. So sometimes the moon is closer to the earth than others, and we need the moon closer to the earth in order for a solar eclipse to happen. Moon varies from about 400,000 kilometers to 360,000 kilometers. So I'm going to bring out my moons. These are not to scale. So in order for a total solar eclipse to occur, the moon and the sun must have the same apparent size. And as I explained to the kids, most of the times they miss each other. But every once in a while, they align perfectly, and there's a total solar eclipse. However, in Ottawa, we're not having a total solar eclipse. You can see a little bit of the sun peeking through there. That means it's not safe to look at the sun ever without solar eclipse glasses on. Sometimes, however, the moon is further away, and then we have what we call an annular eclipse. This is a bit of an exaggeration. The moon does not shrink that much, but this is just to make it a little bit more visible. So there's an annular eclipse. But so the moon's not necessarily in the middle of the sun. Sometimes it's up towards the top here. And as the moon arises from the horizon, you can see these 2 horns on either side. We call those the devil's horns. I encourage the kids to Google that and see what the pictures look like. The word eclipse comes from eclipsis, the ancient Greek word for being abandoned. So back in ancient times, they did not have the scientific understanding that we had now. So when weird things happened in the sky, they tried to pick up a reason for that. There's a number of myths and legends around these solar eclipses. In the North American Cherokee tribes and in Vietnam, they believed a giant frog or toad swallowed the sun and then spit it back out. In China, a celestial dragon was thought to lunch on the sun, causing a solar eclipse. In fact, the Chinese word for an eclipse, qi, means to eat. According to ancient Hindu mythology, the deity Rahu is beheaded by the gods for capturing and drinking Amrita, the god's nectar. Rahu's head flies off into the sky and swallows the sun, causing an eclipse. And then according to Inuit folklore, the sun goddess Melina walked away after a fight with the moon god Anagan, her brother. A solar eclipse happened when Anagan managed to catch up with his sister. The first recorded solar eclipses were as early as 2500 BCE by the Chinese and Babylonians. Here's some historical events that are tied to solar eclipses. So typically rulers, if they were on their throne when a solar eclipse happened, that was not a good thing. The people would say, okay, this must be a bad ruler. They'd either kick them off the throne or kill the king at that point in time. So most kings employed astronomers to tell them when the solar eclipse happened. So what this king would have done is he would have picked somebody else to sit on his throne for the day of the eclipse. And then this person, not knowing there was an eclipse that day, would sit on the throne, they'd get killed. And then the king would resume his throne the day after. Unfortunately, his 2 astronomers failed to predict an eclipse while he was on the throne, so he just beheaded them. One of the earliest records of a solar eclipse was recorded on a tablet found in Syria in 1223 BCE. 585 BCE, this is a good thing that came out of the eclipse. The Lydians and the Medes were at war. Their solar eclipse happened, and they saw it as a sign to make peace with each other. So it was a good thing that came out of that. Now, this is sometimes people will say, well, the crucifixion of Christ, the scripture says the whole land, darkness came over the whole land for 3 hours. Obviously, this is not a solar eclipse, but people do say it is. A solar eclipse, a maximum solar eclipse is maybe 6 minutes. We're having 3 minutes here on this one. The other challenge we have is that the crucifixion took place at Passover, which is a full moon. So we're 14 days away from this. So this is not what happened then. January 27, 632, in Medina, Saudi Arabia, the eclipse coincided with the death of Prophet Muhammad's son Abraham. The prophet reportedly dismissed rumors that this was a miracle. He was actually very forward thinking in terms of his understanding of things. He said, this is just a normal part of of science. It's not anything like a miracle. In 993 and 1004, Ibn Runus of Cairo recorded here in Arabic records of solar eclipses and some lunar eclipses. August 2nd, 1133, King Henry I died shortly after an eclipse, prompting the spread of the superstition that eclipses are bad omens for rulers. And in fact, shortly after his death, Britain fell into a civil war for a number of years. We have a number of scientific discoveries that came out of solar eclipses. So English astronomer Francis Baily first discovered and described Baily's beads. It's a phenomenon that occurs in the seconds before and after totality and a total solar eclipse. Grab my props here again. So you would sort of think when you're watching the solar eclipse that with the moon over top of the sun, it's a nice straight line, at least wearing the eclipse glasses. But as the moon moves off of the sun, you can see that the light is broken up unevenly here. So that's caused by the valleys and mountains on the moon, the light shining through them. And so when I'm talking to the kids, I have them speculate what's causing it. Sometimes they get it right. Sometimes they're completely wrong. But it's always interesting to get their perspective on what they think is happening. July 28th, 1851, the first photograph of the sun's corona was taken by a Prussian photographer called Berkowski. So when we've got a totality here, the only time that we can see the corona, the outermost hottest layer of the sun, is at totality. All other times the sun is too bright and we can't see it. And this is the earliest photograph taken in 1851. In August 18th, 1868, a French astronomer, Jules Janssen, put up a prism against the light coming from the corona. He wanted to figure out what gas that was. And by splitting the colors and measuring the width of the colors, he determined that it was a new gas they hadn't discovered before. And he wanted to know what to call it. So he called it helium, after the Greek word for the sun, helios. So helium was discovered as a result of that. And then Albert Einstein and his theory of general relativity. So a lot of kids, at least by grade 6, know a fair amount about him, which is great news. But part of that theory of relativity is that every object has gravity, and the larger the object, the greater the gravity. And Einstein had speculated that if you had enough gravity, you could bend light. So how do you prove that? Well, so Arthur Eddington went down to South America during a total solar eclipse. And what he did was he noticed that there was a star that should have been closer to the sun than it actually appeared in the sky during the solar eclipse, as you can see here. And what's happening there is the sun is bending the light. And we see this effect when we do some deep space observing as well. This is called gravitational lensing. So that what we have here is we've got a large galaxy in the middle here, billions of stars, massive amount of gravity. There's another galaxy hiding in behind. And what this galaxy is doing is the gravity is bending the light around so that we can actually see the galaxy in behind. And it's the same effect that was observed by Sir Arthur Eddington. So getting now to the upcoming event on April the 8th. Is it a once-in-a-lifetime event? Absolutely. We'll talk about this in a minute. But first of all, what do you think the folks in the International Space Station are going to see? Any ideas? Yeah, it depends where they are in their orbit. Yeah, good answer. They're going to see the shadow of the moon racing across the Earth. And this eclipse starts in the Pacific, comes up towards Mexico, up through Texas, and then ultimately up to Canada, and then exits the other side of Newfoundland. This is from the Canadian Space Agency, this video simulation. It was a little bit boring to me. It didn't have any music, so I paid for a music license and put a chunk of music on top of it. So let's take a look at this. can just see the moon moving across the sun. Are going to move into daylight. There's a shadow racing across the Mexico. Boundless of Mexico. Across Texas. Up, there's Niagara Falls, New Brunswick, PI. So the kids are fascinated by that. So what is it like to experience totality? I've never experienced it myself, but this video from 2017 is really well done. We saw this eclipse in Ottawa, about 60% of the sun was covered. I remember a bunch of us were here at the Canadian Aviation Space Museum. We had 2,000 eclipse glasses. 8,000 showed up. They had to call in the RCMP because of the traffic. I expect it's going to be a zoo here on Monday as well. In any case, it was a perfect day for a solar eclipse. And down here, where this one is filmed, they experienced totality. So at totality, what you're going to experience, and even in Ottawa, because we're very close to it, we're at 98.5% coverage, the temperature is going to drop 10 degrees. The birds are going to stop singing. And once we've reached the maximum, look around, you're going to see a 360-degree sunset. That's the only time you're going to see it is during totality. But you'll see these folks here get a little bit excited. Watch this. Quickly, it gets dark, but it doesn't get fully dark, like twilight. They have about a minute and 50 seconds to just flip, take the glasses off. Watch the person take a flash photo. There we go. That's going to work. What they say. The outside in. And there we go. So if you join some of the crowds here, it's probably going to be something like that. Obviously, this is what you're going to see. This is showing you 360 degrees, the sunset all the way around. Really neat effect. Again, the corona. There's the path of totality. As you can see, we're outside of that. The actual path has been adjusted in the last week or so. It's a minor adjustment. It's not going to impact Kingston or any of those other areas. But if you're right on the border of totality, it might impact you. So South Shore of Montreal, Kingston, Belleville, Picton, Brockville, Prescott, Cornwall are all good spots to go. Montreal, South Shore, Sherbrooke, Fredericton, Summerside, PEI, Port of Asque, Newfoundland, that's for the ferry lands, and Gander is right in the middle of it. This is another graphic video showing the path of totality. What I find interesting here is the maximum duration of totality as it moves across. This is obviously sped up once you start to see the times here. But you can see it's going on the north shore of Lake Erie right now. It's going to skip Windsor. And Hamilton is just on the edge, but St. Catharines and Niagara Falls are right in the middle. And then we're going to move on towards Prince Edward County. And we've got Belleville, Kingston, Gananoque, Brockville, Prescott, Cornwall, South Shore of Montreal. So you'll see that the maximum duration of totality is starting to shrink as it moves across. And then it goes into the States for a little bit and then comes back out and buzzes Fredericton in New Brunswick. And they don't show it on the map here, but it does pass right over Summerside. And then it's off to Newfoundland. It's going to Port of Asque is right in the center of it. And then Gander is not quite the center, but it's far enough into totality to have a neat event there. Okay, so that's the path. What's going to happen here in Ottawa, if you stay in Ottawa, this is sped up 500 times, but this is the sun touches the moon touches the edge of the sun at 2:11 and 40 seconds or something like that. So they rounded it up to 2:12. And here's the sped up 500 times. And you'll see that once we reach the maximum, a little bit of the sun is still glowing around the edge. That means it's not safe to look at it without glasses. Is it really a once in a lifetime opportunity? Let's take a look at the last time we had some total eclipses here in Canada. Fredericton, the last time they had it was in the year 932. Montreal, 1932. So they're having a total solar eclipse. The next total solar eclipse over Atlantic Canada is in 2079, Toronto 2144, and in Ottawa 2205. It'll be our great grandchildren that will see that.
It'll be cloudy that day.
And it'll still be cloudy that day. Yes.
So please follow how it happened.
Yeah, Parliament should be done by then. Yeah. So observing a total solar eclipse, the most important message, and for most of the folks here, you don't need to hear this, but certainly for the kids, they needed to know, never look at the sun directly, even for an instant. And I got a ton of questions around that, because the kids would go, well, I came up with some numbers that there's no hard science in terms of how long does it take for you to have eye damage when looking at the sun. So I just came up with a rule of thumb. I said, if you look at the sun for 5 seconds, you're going to have some temporary eye damage. Like when somebody takes a flash photograph, you see all those spots. And I said, those spots may last for a couple of months. If you look at it for 7 seconds, those spots may not go away. It could be permanent eye damage. If you look at the sun for 10 to 30 seconds, you're blind. You'll have no central vision. I think the kids got the message. But then the kids will go, well, okay, what if I just look up at the sun and look back down? And I said, well, yes, you could do that, but you know what's going to happen? You're going to look up and go, oh, that's really cool. And you keep looking at it and keep looking at it. Next thing you know, you've gone past those 10 seconds and you have permanent eye damage. Unfortunately, a lot of the schools did not give kids solar eclipse glasses. In fact, the public board banned the schools from giving them to the kids. Now, I guess maybe they're worried about the fake glasses being handed out. I don't know what the reason was. 2 schools here in Ottawa, Ashbury College and Our Lady of Victory Catholic Elementary School, both did give glasses to all their students. And Sir Thomas More School in the East End for the grade 5, 6s, where I did an astronomy session there, one of the teachers paid for them out of her own pocket. She was quite concerned about their safety. So it's very important that I had to sort of emphasize to the kids, and some of the kids, particularly in one of the schools I went to, was in a very poor area of Ottawa. I knew that the parents probably couldn't afford the solar eclipse glasses, so I had to give them some alternate ways of looking at the eclipse. So when it comes to the solar eclipse glasses, obviously you don't look up at the sun and put them on, you look down, put them on, and look up. And when you look up, I say before you put them on, check them for scratches, hold them up to a bright light, and you shouldn't see anything. Okay, if you can start to see things through here, that means they're no good, throw them away. I show these plastic type of glasses here. I'm shining this on the screen here, that doesn't help you at all. Okay, so that you've got these plastic type of glasses. These are really good. I have a bunch of those I'm going to be taking down to Kingston. They're quite comfortable to wear. A number of kids had telescopes. They said, oh, I got to bring my telescope out. And I went, do you have a certified solar filter going over the outside end of your telescope? And they went, nope. And I said, leave it in the house. Because if you point a telescope at the sun, by the time it reaches the eyepiece, the light is super, super intense. And they said, well, I'm just going to put my solar eclipse glasses over that eyepiece. And I said, they're going to melt. And next thing you're knowing, you're going to be looking at the sun, super magnified, and you're going to have permanent eye damage. The other thing is that older telescopes sometimes were sold with these sun pieces that went into the eyepiece. They're very dangerous as well. With all that heat coming down there, they often crack while the person's looking through there. So that's not safe. So what I did with the kids is I showed all of them how to make a pinhole camera. So basically, we take a cereal box, put a piece of white paper in the bottom here, cut out a viewing hole, cut out another hole, cover it with tin foil and poke a little hole through it. So you got a little pinhole. And then with your back to the sun, you look through here and you can see a little mini eclipse. And on this next slide here, the Canadian Space Agency actually has a good cutaway diagram of what this looks like. Although they're quite, that size of the image inside that box has to be about 40 feet long to be that big. However, they do get the message. The other thing that's really cool, and Simon mentioned that the last time he did a solar eclipse for folks, this is the favorite thing for folks to look at, not through the telescope, but just taking a colander with lots of holes in it, holding that up against the sunlight, and then seeing the images on the ground. You could also use a spoon with holes in it. Or I told the kids, if you forget your colander at home, just make a little hole with your finger like that, let the sun shine through it. You go create your own little eclipse on the ground. And the kids thought that was a really cool thing to do. If you're in totality, there's about an hour where your glasses have to be on. In Kingston, you'll have about 3 minutes where you can take them off, and then another hour. Here in Ottawa, glasses on the whole time for the full 2 hours. There's not a safe time to take them off. When it comes to the other thing that kids were asking about was taking pictures with their camera phone. I suggested pointing a camera at a full sun is not a good idea. It'll burn a lot of the components in there. So you try putting your solar eclipse glasses over top of your lenses. The problem with that is that as you're trying to adjust the phone, you're also looking at the sun. So just you have to be very careful with that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mount my camera phone on a tripod, and then I have a little pinhole thing that I'm going to use to align it to the sun, so I don't have to look at the sun. And I said that, well, though during the maximum eclipse, you probably could take a picture with your camera phone without any protection on it. That'd probably be okay. So this is the timing in Ottawa. So the partial eclipse begins at 2:11 and 35 seconds. Maximum eclipse is at 3:25, and the whole thing ends at 4:35 as the moon leaves the sun. The timing in Kingston, and this will vary if you're down in Cornwall and Prescott, it's slightly different. It'll be a little bit later as you move further east. So in Kingston, from 3:22:15 to 3:25:19, we have totality. So I'll be able to take my glasses off and observe it with the naked eye. And I'm hoping it's not going to be too cloudy there. Solar eclipse safety, never ever stare directly at the sun. Use only certified solar viewing glasses. There's a lot of stuff in the news today. Amazon has reached out to all their customers who bought uncertified glasses, and there's quite a few of them, and has refunded their money and said, don't use them. I wish they would have checked that up front. That would have made a lot more sense. However, there are some brands on Amazon, one of them being Galaxium. So that's, whoops, sorry. Galaxium. If you have one of those, they are certified, they're perfectly safe. Andrea has kindly donated a lot of glasses from her legal firm. They're made by a company called Rainbow Symphony, and they are perfectly safe. Rainbow Symphony is on the approved list, as is Galaxium. And if you got glasses, if you bought them from the RASC, they were also made by Rainbow Symphony, so they are completely certified. Okay. Keep children under your supervision. And during the partial eclipse in Manchester in 1984, 11 people were left with permanent sight loss from staring at the sun. I'm really worried about what's going to happen with this eclipse. It's going through major populated areas with people who maybe have not learned about all the eclipse safety things. And I suspect there'll be hundreds of people with permanent sight loss as a result of this eclipse, unfortunately. The other message I'm trying to get out is don't throw away your solar eclipse glasses. We have a partial solar eclipse on March 29th of 2025. The sun is already in the eclipse as it's rising, so it's a very short event, 25 minutes. But then on August the 12th, 2026, you get to experience almost the full 2 hours. Again, it's only 26% of the sun is covered, but those are really interesting things to look at as well. Don't drive with your solar eclipse glasses on. This is pretty common sense, right? But I told the kids, yeah, drive with your eyes closed. I told the kids because I know a lot of them, their parents are going to be driving them out of town. It's a PD day. And I can just see, I said, if your parents put their solar eclipse glasses on while they're driving, yell at them to take them off. Okay. And in fact, if you get into an accident and you're wearing your solar eclipse glasses, you will be charged with impaired driving. Same consequences drinking and driving. If you're caught wearing those glasses and you cause an accident. This is from the Missouri Department of Transportation on their website. I know Texas has a number of signs along the road as well. Poor folks in Texas, though, are getting thunderstorms on Monday. So anyways, I think we're not looking too bad here, but I know Mick is going to give us the gruesome details on what the weather is going to be like. So where will you be on April 8th? Enjoy. Thank you.
Okay. So further questions for Dave? I think he covered.
I can't see people here, so I may turn up the lights a bit.
I'm coming to that.
Yes, planets are visible.
I'm coming to that.
Okay, Mick's going to cover that one.
Anyone else?
Got a comment, Dave, your point about pointing your iPhone or what have you at the sun. I've been organizing a show at my place and we talking to the neighbors. Every single one of them was shocked when I said exactly what you've been saying. We're going to see a lot of damaged phones.
I should go into the phone repair business, I think. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the electronics, the sensing chip in there just can't handle that. Yeah.
Dave and Nick, Zoom can't hear anything you talk like that. So you could try to use the microphone, please, or repeat the question.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Simon was just mentioning the law of folks in his neighborhood. He's hosting a party there. Are all want to bring their camera phones, and they're very surprised when Simon said you're going to destroy the phones by pointing them at the eclipse. So yeah, we're getting the message out, albeit a little bit slowly.
Any questions online for Dave?
No.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
One is a friend of mine remarked he was looking at
Just a second, I'm going to bring you a microphone. Can you run that up
Yep.
so people online can hear it? And can we maybe have the house lights up just a little bit so we can see who's there? There we go.
So Rick Wagner here. A friend of mine in Kingston was just looking at the Niagara site. And he noticed that there's going to be like 500,000 people down along the waterfront, looking at the falls, et cetera, trying to get a picture of the eclipse and the falls and stuff. Of course, the falls are on one side, the eclipse is on the other side. And if you think what's behind you when you're looking at the falls, there's a cliff topped by hotels and apartment buildings. Nobody down there is going to see the eclipse. So when you pick a site, make sure you'll be able to see the sun from sort of 2 o'clock till 4 o'clock. It's
Yeah.
bummer to get stuck behind a tree.
Yeah, good point. Okay, do we have any other comments? Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yes, hello. My name is Olivier. I intend to go like southeastern Quebec for the eclipse, but I got 20 by 80 binoculars, and I got filters for each side. Essentially, how much is it safe essentially to use? Like I've used them for solar viewing before, but as I look around and everything during the eclipse, as we get near, what's the tricks not to look at the sun and start switching the glasses? Should we time it up or?
Okay, so you're going to be in totality. So what you can do is you can Google the location and say solar eclipse, and then you will get an actual right down to the second when totality starts and stops. But you're going to have your solar eclipse glasses on, and you're going to see when the moon has completely covered the sun. It's going to be visible all around you. It's going to get as dark as it can right at that point. In terms of using binoculars, as long as you've got a proper solar film, the Baader solar film in completely covering them, you're okay. But yeah, just make sure that it's the same type of film that you've got in your solar eclipse glasses. I'm not, the other trick you're going to have with the binoculars is how are you going to point them at the sun? Because you're going to be peeking around the binoculars trying to get in front of the sun. You're going to be burning your eyes out at the same time. And maybe you need to quickly rig up something in front of the binoculars. You'll see this device here. Let me just pull it over. I don't know whether this is visible online. Maybe Mick, if you can move the camera a little bit. Yeah, okay. So in the front of here, I've just got a little piece of metal here with a tiny hole. And as that's pointed at the sun, I get a little image of the sun on here. You may want to create a little, maybe a U piece of cardboard with a little hole in it, put that in front of the binoculars, put those binoculars on a tripod, and use that hole to position your binoculars so you're not staring at the sun. Because that's the challenge with folks who are trying to use their cameras or those who have binoculars. You've got to look at the sun to see if you're in the right position, and you can destroy your eyesight so quickly. Yeah. Any other questions? Got one over here. Well, no, people online can't hear you shouting out. That's the issue.
Quick question. I'm just wondering what the impact or the effect will be like here in Ottawa, where it's not going to be in totality. Totality. Thank you.
Okay. Basically, it's going to be very similar to that video that I showed you, where it's 99%. The difference being that there's going to be a little bit more sunlight, but you're still going to be able to see the 360 sunset. And you'll still feel that 10-degree drop in temperature. We're so close to totality that you're going to feel all those effects. The only difference, the only disadvantage of being in Ottawa is that when we do reach maximum, you can't take your glasses off to look at the corona. Okay, it's just not safe to do that. Okay. Yep.
Just a comment. I've been fortunate to see 2 total eclipses when the sky was clear and the sun was in a good position. And all this talk about binoculars and things like that, if you're in a place where there's totality, the best thing to do is just put your binoculars down and look with your own eyes and enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Okay, I don't see any more questions, so thank you very much. And I think Mick's going to be talking about some planets that we will be able to see as the skies darken. Sorry, I just stole your thunder.
No, it's cool. And yeah. I'll find the damn switch.
It's on.
Yeah, I know, I want it off.
They turn it off upstairs.
Okay. All righty, now I use the laser again. The question as to what else is visible during totality, I put this together last night, so it's a bit of a rush. But noticed that there hadn't been a lot of information around. So for those of you that are already aware of the side events during totality, my apologies. For those of you that aren't aware, here we go. So in the more or less center of the screen there, you've got the sun and the moon, obviously conjuncted right there. 2 planets will, in all likelihood, be very visible. We've got Venus sort of to the right and down a bit from the sun, maybe a good handspan, down to the further south and west. Reasonably bright at the moment. Dave told us it's visible in the early evening. Well, on Monday, it may be visible in mid-afternoon as well. Up to the top left, sort of 2 handspans away from the sun and the moon, you have Jupiter, which is exceptionally bright at the moment, and I suspect will be a really good target, especially, as Dave told us, we'll be in a sort of a deep twilight the whole time during totality. So it won't be pitchy dark and you won't see all the stars, but bright planets are a pretty good bet. And I think we might see some nice images of that come the May meeting. The icing on the cake is that we have a reasonably bright comet in the same part of the sky. A periodic comet 12 Pons Brooks, sorry. And it will be slightly to the right of Jupiter at about the same elevation. So yeah, drop your binoculars, observe the corona, absorb the experience, because this will be my fourth, and it is a life-changing event, in my opinion. So soak it all in, make the most of it, and try and see the planets as well, and the comet. As to the weather, people have alluded, it's looking reasonably good for us. This is a current forecast as of about 2 hours ago, was it, Chris? So as you can see, through Sunday, Monday, all the way up along the Ottawa, St. Lawrence Valley, St. Lawrence River, and Lake Ontario, it's looking pretty good. You might have to do a little bit of cloud dodging, but by and large, it's sunny and slightly cloudy over the whole region for Monday on the current forecast. So fingers crossed for that, but we'll still have the sacrifice outside later. Okay, our next speaker, Bojan, come on up. So while we're on the topic of outreach, we seem to have had a lot of it tonight, and the theme continues. Bojan has been also working with schools over a number of years, and you can tell how many years because the 17-year-old in that photo is now this guy. So just like Paul Cloninger, your photo needs an update, mate.
Yep.
So he's here to talk to us tonight about using light amplification equipment for visual observing.
Thank you.
And big control there. Do it. Nope.
How does this work? Just the,
Go up that way towards
and how do I go back if I need?
the red.
Red. Cheers.
And lasers.
Thank you. All right. I can't see anyone. So my name is Bojan Scepanovic. I've been an astronomer here in Ottawa for about 18 years. So I want to talk to you about today night vision and how it changes everything for astronomy. So these two pictures are pictures taken with night vision on the left without a telescope. So that's just night vision like this, pointed up at the sky with some filters. And then on the right is through a larger reflecting telescope. Who am I? Just a quick intro. Started astronomy the ripe old age of 18, as you saw in that previous picture. And ever since then, I joined the OAOG, so that's the other sister organization that we have here. I've been doing lots of outreach at the chapters at Blair. I dabbled in EAA, that's electronically assisted astronomy. So that's when you use computers, cameras, and gadgets to help you see things that you can't see with your own eyes. I work at a computer for 50 to 60 hours a week, and that's relevant, and I'll tell you why very soon. And now I purely do visual astronomy. So I don't use any computers. I don't use any cameras. I just plop the scope down and I see what I can see with minimal effort. So quick agenda, my brief history of visual observing. Very importantly, why visual observing is so difficult and challenging. What is night vision, how it works, how it helps, what can you see with it? And then hopefully by the end of it, you're excited enough to be like, where can I buy this? So the reality for visual observing. This is me at the chapters at Blair with my very first telescope 18 years ago or so. And in the astronomy world, this is more for the new people. This is an 8-inch telescope, so 8-inch diameter, roughly about that. And in our hobby, that's a medium approaching large telescope. So if you're trying to see things that are very faint or very far away, you would buy a bigger telescope to collect more light, see more detail. So I pulled this thing out, and the reality for visual observing, you take your telescope, you go somewhere, and you have your astronomy map of what you want to look at. I think this looks like the North American Nebula. And then you point it at the sky, and then you look through the eyepiece for the first time with your eyes, and you see this. Now, for me, the thing on the left looks a lot more interesting than the thing on the right. The thing on the right isn't even the same region of sky. I literally just Googled stars and pasted it up there because that's what you see. You're expecting the thing on the left and the thing on the right is what you see. And the problem is the thing on the left was taken with a camera, it was taken with filters. It was probably processed on a computer for 3 to 4 hours in Photoshop after that. So you can never see the thing on the left, especially in color, with your own eyes. That's kind of a problem because I really wanted the thing on the left. So, well, you could just buy a bigger telescope. So this is one of our resident members, Attila, on a perhaps 12-foot ladder to get to the top of his probably 14-foot tall telescope. For most of us, that's also pretty impractical. If you don't have a permanent setup, you're not buying a giant telescope like this. He also has a whole trailer in the back dedicated to storing the telescope to go to a dark site. I love astronomy. I can't bring myself to do that. So you could still get a really big scope so you can see more, but even then, our eyes are sadly inadequate at actually resolving some of the wavelengths that you want to see. The picture previously was taken probably in hydrogen alpha. That's the red portion of the spectrum. Our eyes are just very bad at seeing that wavelength of light. So even if you buy a giant telescope and drag it out somewhere, you're not still going to see the thing on the left. So the reality for visual observing, why is it so hard? First thing is dark adaptation. So as you go into a dark site, you turn off all the lights, you stop looking at your phone, there's no bright lights, your pupils end up dilating. That takes about 30 minutes to happen. As your pupils dilate and get bigger, more light enters, and in theory, you can see more faint things. In order to do that, you need to make sure that there's no bright lights, no bright car lights, no people shining a flashlight asking why you're standing at the end of a roadway in the dark, those types of things. You could wear Eclipse glasses and see nothing for 30 minutes, yes. Age and pupil dilation, this is part of the dark adaptation. The older you get, the less flexible your your pupils can dilate. So it'll take actually longer and longer for your pupils to reach full dilation the older you get, AKA it's harder to see stuff the older you get. Location, I work here in Ottawa. If it's a clear night on a Tuesday, I'm just not driving an hour outside of the city with a giant scope, setting it up, observing, and then driving back and then going to work the next morning. It's just not realistic. So anything that helps me avoid some of these things on this list, I was very happy to spend the money. Size of telescope, as previously covered, the bigger your scope, the more light you gather, the more you see. That one's pretty straightforward. Light pollution. We live here in Ottawa. Street lights are on 24/7, even on small residential streets. When you look at a map at night of Ottawa, you just see a giant glow of light. That same light pollution is what your telescope sees. So you have to contend with that light. You either need to filter it out. You also need to sometimes isolate your telescope from street lights. The street lights will shine partially into your telescope and reduce the contrast of what you're trying to see. Atmosphere, this one is on the topic of seeing and transparency. Basically, if a volcano erupts, or like last year, I think it was, all the forest fires around Canada, that drifts across Canada. Suddenly, you're trying to look at a star, but you're looking through smoke from forest fires or from a volcano around the world. That all degrades the image, sometimes significantly, to the point where you can't see anything or you can't take a picture as you'd like. This one's my favorite. This is actually called averted viewing. So we have rods and cones in our eyes. Those are two types of cells that let you see. Rods are the vision that is out here on your periphery. They are more sensitive to faint light, but they are less able to show you details. The cones are the things that are in the middle of your vision, like this. They let you see more detail, but are less sensitive to light. So Simon Hammer, who's right here, I remember I met him 18 years ago at that chapter's location. He's like, yeah, you just need to use averted imagination, because it's kind of like that. You have the object in front of you, but you look beside it to try and see more. And that just sounded absurd. I didn't buy a telescope to look beside the thing that I want to see. I want to look at the thing with a lot of detail. So why I don't do electronically assisted astronomy. So what that is you plug in a camera into your telescope, you plug that to your computer, and then you sit at your computer to see what your telescope sees. I had a Malin cam about a decade ago. I played with that. but I don't have a permanent setup. So the reality is you take 100, 150 pounds of gear somewhere. Even if it's the end of your driveway, you're dragging 100 pounds of gear out. You balance the mount, you polar align the mount, you do good star alignment, plate solving, whatever. You wait, then you play with computers, drivers, cables, and then you sit at the computer to look at the nice pictures. I spend 50 hours on the computer already per week. I'm not going to do astronomy plus more computers. So that was my requirement. So finally, we get to what is night vision. So this is night vision. It is the type of night vision that you're probably thinking of if you've watched any military type movie. It's the guys running around at night shooting each other and everything's like green, but they can see everything at night. This is what night vision is. So this particular type of night vision has two eyepieces, so it splits the light into two, so you can see with both eyes. This one is just a monocular, so you can see just with one eye. So what is night vision? It's the military thing that is usually a green tint. It's almost exclusively used by militaries as what's called a force multiplier. If you're running around chasing someone in the forest, you can see at night, they can't. That's a force multiplier. Used for troops to see at night, and it doesn't allow you to see in the pitch black. So what that means is no photons, no signal coming in, there's nothing to amplify, you don't see anything. The way these things fix that is each one of these night vision units has an IR flashlight built in. So it turns on an IR flashlight. We can't see IR with our eyes, but this thing can. So this room was pitch black, I could still see because everything would be flooded with an IR flashlight that's built in. This thing runs off a AA battery and runs for like 50, 60 hours on that. So a small group of astronomers, me and a couple other people, use this for astronomy. You ask how small is this group? So on cloudy nights, which is perhaps the largest astronomy online forum in the world, we have this little subsection for night vision astronomy. And as of a couple months ago, there was 153 of us globally who self-declare as using this. So of all the types of astronomy and sub niches and everything, there's a very few people who actually use this, but hopefully I'm going to sell you on it soon. So how does night vision work? Photons of all wavelengths enter the front lens. So that's coming in from left. Those photons in a photocathode tube get converted to electrons. So photons get converted to electrons. They go through this microchannel plate right here in the middle. That's a fancy way of saying electrons come in, their voltage gets amplified, so the signal gets increased. That's done by the battery and the power pack. And then out on the other side come more electrons. And then in the end, they hit a phosphor screen. So that's right here. So the phosphor gets hit by the electrons, and what happens is the electron forces another photon to get created. So in the end, you see an amplified version of the image. Depending on the color of phosphor that you use, that's the color of the image you get. So the images are all monochrome. So if your phosphor is green, like this one right here, your image is green, and it's just monochrome and green. If lately, the operators who actually use this in the militaries around the world, they've complained that the green is too fatiguing on the eyes. So all new night vision is generally white phosphor. So your image will be black and white when it comes out of this. What I want to highlight here is that this is an analog device. There is no digital anything going on. It's photons to electrons, magnified electrons and photons. There's no digital signal processing. There's no bit conversions or like processing going on. It's just a very simple device, relatively speaking. So everything you know about CCDs and those types of things go out the window. So there are three types. Type 1 is active illumination. So this is your cheap security camera that you have at home. All of those have an IR flashlight. Sometimes you can see like a ring of red LEDs that activate at night. That's bathing everything in IR light so that the camera can actually amplify more signal and have something to see. Type 2 image intensifiers is what this is right here. So it takes existing photons, amplifies them, and makes them brighter. The cool thing about this is it has a spectral range of 400 to 1,000 nanometers. So that's both the visual spectrum of what our eyes can see, but it also goes deep into the IR. which some astronomical objects do release. So you can see things in a spectrum that you can't see with your own eyes. The last type is thermal imaging, which is what it sounds like. You've probably seen it, helicopter looking down at the ground, blue, red colors. You can just see the heat coming off things. So we don't care about 1 or 3, we just care about type 2, which is what this one is right here. So this one's going to get a bit technical. I promise this is the most technical slide. It's called night vision performance metrics. So how do we actually evaluate the performance of these things? First one, signal to noise ratio. That one's unitless. That one's pretty straightforward. That one ranges from 25 to 36 units. If you want to buy one of these for astronomy, you are seeking for a unit that has this type of performance. Resolution, it's measured in linear pairs per millimeter. That's just how these photocathode tubes are manufactured. It's basically a grid where the photons are coming in, and the tighter the density of that grid, the higher resolution is, and you'll see tighter stars and more definition around the side of objects. Automatic versus manual gain. What's the equivalent to that on a camera? That's your ISO setting or exposure. So this unit has a knob here, and that's basically make my image brighter or make it dimmer. So if your image is bright, you can turn it down, and vice versa. Figure of merit, that is signal to noise ratio and resolution just multiplied together, believe it or not. So that's sort of a general just indicator of how performant your night vision is. And that usually ranges from 1800 to 2600. The higher you get that figure of merit, FOM, the better it is. EBI, this is the last most important one. This is your equivalent background illumination. That is your noise floor. If you have a very faint object, but the device is making a noisy image that is more bright than your object, you're never going to see the object. So you want your device to have a low noise floor such that the image can outshine it, basically. And you're trying to minimize that value as much as possible. So housings, PVS 14, that's what this is. This is also a military grade housing. It's used to be mounted on guns and the things you see people run around with in movies. That's the same device here. It's very common. You can buy it in a lot of places, and the front lens can be removed, but just not very trivially. Mod 3C, this is an American-only housing. It's built for astronomy. You can remove the front lens, which means you can do prime mode, but also afocal. I'll explain what that is soon. And the Omni M, this is a French piece of night vision that has been designed with the astronomy market in mind. So a smaller housing, it's lighter, and the front lens can be removed. They both have, all three can have manual gain. So how to use night vision in astronomy. This is perhaps my favorite one. Instead of taking an hour to set up your telescope for imaging or whatever, you're taking out the trash. You go out with this. It's as big as your phone. You can just point it up at the sky. You can see constellations. You can see nebula at 1x if you have the right filters. So you can see a lot with just this thing right here. Zoom mount. So on another night vision I have, you can remove the front lens and you can put SLR lenses on front. So you can get magnification and you can zoom in also just in the city or at a dark sky. Prime mode is what it is. You remove the front lens, you put that directly into your telescope, and then you have your standard field of view calculations. So this is usually used if you want to zoom in further. You use a prime mode for that. And then there's afocal mode. So this is going to get a bit technical. So why is afocal great too? So if you see the blue telescope down there, that's the same telescope from 18 years ago that I still use. What there is in order of appearance, okay, whoops, sorry. That's a 8-inch by f5 scope down there. There's a 55 millimeter Plossl, a converter, and then the night vision just screws in directly into that entire optical train. So a bit of math is fun. So that's an 8-inch f5 scope with a 55 millimeter Plossl. That gives you an exit pupil of 11 millimeters. So that means the image coming out of the end of the eyepiece is 11 millimeters. If you were listening to the pupil dilation part, our pupils can only dilate to a max of 7 or 8 millimeters. That means if you were trying to look through this eyepiece, you'd see an illumination of 11 millimeters. So it'd be overflowing over your eye. Not all the light from the eyepiece would be entering your eye. That doesn't matter because this thing has an opening of like 24 millimeters. So as long as you can make your exit pupil up to 24 millimeters, this will capture the image and you won't waste any light, basically. The front lens on this one specifically is 27 millimeters at f1.2. So the way the math works out, you're projecting an image into a lens, and that all acts as a focal reducer. Why do we like focal reducers? It's because if you're trying to look at a large object, like the North American Nebula, for example, you will actually zoom out and you will be able to capture the whole image in one field of view, as opposed to being zoomed in very much. You also get this focal reduction, so the speed increases, the image brightness becomes higher, there's more photons concentrated per unit area, and then this thing actually amplifies the light on top of that. TeleVue actually makes an adapter to convert the 55 millimeter to a 67 millimeter eyepiece, and that whole thing works out to an 8-inch scope running at f1.8. So super fast, super bright image, and this thing then amplifies it even further. So the upgrade, this is a mount that I built for what is a 12-inch f4 imaging Newtonian. Again, I don't image in the traditional sense. I don't need a tracking mount and 80 pounds of counterweights. So I just built this to plop down on the ground. It's already running at f4. So when we do the same calculations with the 67 mil eyepiece, exit pupil of almost 17 millimeters, but it's running at f1.6. So that's a 12-inch scope running at f1.6. What can you see? Well, that's the North American Nebula. That is my field of view. So I can capture almost the whole North American Nebula in a 12-inch scope. I can also see almost the entire Orion's belt. So that gives you a sense of size, but also brightness, because 12-inch scope plus the image reduction or focal reduction. If you've been paying close attention, we have a camera. Technically, the technology doesn't matter. It's just something that amplifies light, but the exposure time is 0. Everything's live. So as you move this around to look throughout the room, the image refreshes instantly. There's no shutter speed or exposure of 2, 3, 4, 10 seconds, whatever, which means we can use filters. So with the filters, you can cut out light pollution. So we know that the street lights in Ottawa emit lights at some wavelength. So you buy a filter that cuts out the wavelengths of light from street lights, but let through the light from the objects we want to look at. So you can use IR pass filters to cut out basically almost all light pollution and just do deep IR, or you can do H-alpha filters. So narrow band up to 3 nanometer that I use H-alpha filters that let you see some really cool stuff. So that's what that looks like now, the 12-inch scope, a filter wheel, a bunch of filters on a manual mount, and I can just drag that out on wheels. I don't have to lift it, which is great. So this is a online friend who's also into night vision astronomy. He's from London, England. So imagine being at a dark sky. This is a dark site, like Bortle 3 sky, as he said. You take this, you point it at the sky, and you see that. I don't know about you, but I've never seen Barnard's Loop other than in pictures, but there's something really cool about putting this up to your eye, and you can scan it, you can look at it, you can change out the lens and look at Barnard's Loop. There's the rosette off to the left, and there's Orion almost being blown out in that picture. This is a picture of the rosette through, I think, his 16-inch scope. So same thing, everything I described, eyepiece, filter, and this thing. This is a picture of the Horsehead Nebula, a pretty dim object if you're familiar with astronomy. I can see this from my house near Carleton University under a bright street light using this, a 3 nanometer filter, and the 12-inch scope you saw. And no integration time, no fiddling with computers and drivers and whatever. You just put this in the eyepiece, and this is what I see at the eyepiece. This is slightly better with slightly better contrast, but you can still see the Horsehead. This is my picture that I took. I don't like taking pictures, so this is very quick and dirty. But this is the North American Nebula with the 3 nanometer H-alpha filter as seen at the eyepiece. If you remember, I mentioned earlier, it's important for your device to have manual gain. The picture on the left and the picture on the right are the same. It's just the gain is turned down. So the amplification on the left is turned down. So when you do that, you can actually start getting a lot of subtle details here, for example, on the North American Nebula that get blown out over here. So you can play with the gain on the fly. Everything's instantly responsive, and it's a lot of fun. As I said earlier, one of my favorite ways to use it is just put it up to your eye and look up at the sky. So if you go up to a cottage, you paddle out into the middle of the lake and you can see the Milky Way like shining very brightly. Like it's an awesome experience looking up at the Milky Way, and you see all the structure in it, and you're not like squinting. You're like, oh yeah, I think I see the Milky Way. No, like you see the Milky Way. This was Comet Neowise, whenever Comet Neowise was, or early COVID maybe, a lake somewhere in Algonquin Park. Again, you can use it to look at comets. You can look at anything that is kind of faint, but you want to just make the image brighter. This was a exercise in craziness. So last year at Starfest, I met Attila for the first time. He has a 36-inch scope, so that scope's mirror is like this big, and we needed the 14-foot ladder to get up to it. So at like 2 a.m., I'm like, hey, Attila, do you want to have some fun? Do you want to plug in my night vision into your perhaps largest amateur telescope in Canada? And he's like, yeah, why not? And we stayed up until like 5 a.m. just looking through his enormous telescope, plus the night vision, plus filters. It was 4 a.m. when I took this picture on the right. I don't even remember what this is, but this is what it looked like at the eyepiece. So that's what I want to emphasize. No playing, no fiddling with anything, no cameras. You just look at the eyepiece, kind of what traditional astronomy was. I'm not sure if this is going to work. Do I need to click again? This video is sped up, I don't know, 12 times. Petrie Island was doing some astronomy a couple years ago, some Starlink satellites that were barely visible to the naked eye. But again, with the night vision, just everything's a lot brighter. So you can look at satellites with this. So what can you see with this? A lot more. With the 8-inch f5 scope with a relatively poor performance relative to what's on the market. I could see Leo's triplet galaxies in an 8-inch scope, which are like magnitude 10.3. I could still see magnitude 13 and 14 galaxies with this thing. Open clusters were bright. And with filters, you can look at nebula that you can never see with your naked eye, ever. The last line here is leading into the next slide. So my 8-inch scope is moderately small relative to the 36-inch one, but a small scope becomes a large one, and then a larger one can become even bigger. So how are we fixing all these issues from the previous slide with night vision? Dark adaptation, it doesn't matter anymore where your pupils are dilating because you have a bright image. You're constantly looking at a very bright amplified image. Your pupils are not going to dilate. They're actually going to shrink. So that problem is solved. Same thing with age and pupil dilation. Doesn't matter. Your pupils are not going to care because you're looking at a bright, almost cell phone-like type screen. Location, you have less of a need to go to dark sites now because you can use filters, and you use the filters to cut out the light pollution. And then I can sit at my house near Carleton University, which is Bortle 3 skies, can barely see the Big Dipper, but I can also look at the Horsehead Nebula through this thing. Size of telescope, this is going to lead into the next slide. A small scope becomes a big scope, and a very big scope becomes an even larger scope. Light pollution, mentioned that. You use filters, you cut out light pollution, it matters less now. Atmosphere, we can't fix that. The atmosphere is the same whether we're looking through this thing or not, so that's fixed. Averted imagination, Simon, no more, so problem solved. And spectral range, the night vision lets you see deep into the IR, where our eyes can't see that wavelength of light at all. So this fixes that problem as well. This slide is a rough comparison. I emphasize rough and take it with a grain of salt, but in the video down here, it's Al Nagler from TeleView who's using some night vision. And in the video, he quoted that a 85 millimeter refractor was behaving like a 10-inch reflector. So that's what that first line is. A 85 mil refractor was performing as if he was looking through a 10-inch reflector. One of those is very easy to manage. An 85 mil refractor you pick up in your hand, you plop it down on a mount, you observe. 10-inch reflector, that's already like 40, 50, 60 pounds you have to lug around. So if you are perhaps getting older and you're tired of lugging around your 10, 12, 14-inch scope, you can buy a small scope and then buy this, and then you suddenly have a highly performing telescope. If you are still chasing like the fuzziest objects that you can see or find, you can buy a 14 or 18-inch scope, and that will behave as if it were a 41 or 53-inch scope. Those things are highly impractical to use. 53-inch scope, you would need a dedicated observatory somewhere in the world. So, quick topic on, or quick comment on laws and legalities. International Traffic in Arms and Regulations is ITAR. So that's an American set of legal standards that limit the export of tanks, grenades, fighter jets, and night vision. So fun fact, even in the 90s, encryption was seen as something that should be controlled and not exported. So even in the 90s, the United States was limiting how strong encryption you could export out of the United States. Canada has the same laws. I'm not exactly sure what they're called, but GAC, Global Affairs Canada, regulates whether these things are allowed to leave the country or not. It is difficult, not impossible, to export night vision from the United States into Canada. They have better performing night vision. So if you're trying to export from the States, you will need to get a lawyer in the States. Someone will need to broker that deal for you. They will need to get an export license for you. It will take a couple $1,000s and a lot of time, a couple of years probably. GAC manages that. Technically, if you read the rules, if you enter the United States with this device, it will fall within their rules. You would technically need permission to leave the United States with this device, even though you entered it. So this is not as easy to purchase as perhaps your telescope and you just go to the local store and you just, one telescope, please. This requires a bit more effort. And I'm approaching the end. The question is perhaps how much? I have this slide because if you've been in the hobby for a while, you have a lot of telescopes perhaps that sit in the corner and they're just conversation pieces. You have eyepieces, you have cameras, you have adapters that you perhaps never use. If you sell all those, you would have enough money for this thing. So at this point, you're probably like, shut up, just take my money. Like, where do I buy this? Because it's that awesome. So I've broken it out for you. There's the Canadian market of used and new night vision. These are the cheapest ones, so bear with me. Blemishes, that's like defects on the image. Some of these are used pretty aggressively on guns and thrown around in the dirt and all those types of things. So they can get damaged. So you can find moderately performing night vision on the used market for about $4,000, which is about what I found this one for. I found it off a guy who puts it on his like paintball gun, and then him and his friends would play paintball at night, shooting each other. So there's a new market of new night vision in Canada that is around 6,000 to 10,000. That depends on the performance of the actual tube inside. This is just the housing. The inside is the actual tube that lets you amplify the image, but it lets you see the cool things that I showed. So kind of worth it. This option is difficult. I have not tried it, but I've researched it. Night vision in the States, $5 grand, $4 grand US, so like $6 grand Canadian, plus the export permits, probably about 8 to 9 grand, plus taxes, probably about 10 grand. That the United States has the most performant night vision that they limit the export of. No other country in the world has managed to reproduce their version of night vision. So that's why it's so difficult to get out. And the last easy option, if cost is no object and you just want to send someone an email, say one night vision, please, and they send you it. This is the only option that exists in that sense. It's called OVNI. It's a French company that claims to specialize in astronomy grade night vision. I would disagree with that. I have one of those as well. It is just a different housing with a standard night vision tube inside that it isn't that much better, given that the price, once, I think I did the math here, the prices are once you have it imported. So that's 15K Canadian once it's imported with Canadian duties and taxes. I have one of those as well, the one at the end of the scale. It is good. It is not that much better than this one. So if you're looking to just get into it, you can definitely get started with this and be totally happy. The one at the end is not extravagantly better. Questions? I left some references in the notes for you so you can start reading up on this and seeing on cloudy nights how people use it. But yeah, that's everything I had.
Really? Thanks, mate.
Yeah.
Don't run away. I've got two questions from one of our online members.
Yep.
Can you give examples of targets for which you would use IR filters?
Yeah, so the question was, where would you use IR filters? IR filters you would use in the city if you want to just look at stars. So you would filter out all the light pollution. So that IR filter I referenced, it was a 685 nanometer long pass filter. What that means is it cuts out almost all visual light and only lets through the deep red and IR. So you could literally stand in downtown Ottawa at Parliament. All the lights would seem to go out, but you would see stars as if you saw them at a cottage 2 hours north of Ottawa.
Just like Harry Potter.
Maybe, yes.
What's that the street light?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Andrea's second question was, what does your mate Gavin in the UK use? Which device?
Gavin has found a supplier of the night vision that I alluded to that's extremely performant. That is more difficult to buy. You basically have to find someone on Instagram or someone on Facebook who's willing to sell it to you. So he has the pictures you saw of his were from the most performant, most least available night vision, but it was actually cheaper than the ones that I quoted. But you're not working with a brick and mortar store with an online presence. You're literally buying it off someone on Instagram and Facebook, depending how you feel about that and spending this kind of money.
Alrighty, so any in the audience got questions?
Thanks, a very interesting talk. With digital, you worry about pixels and resolution. In this case, since it's analog devices, I understand it, is there any issue about the resolution, or is it just limited by your retina and your eyeball? For example, does the screen where the electrons hit and then they emit photons that are visible, does that have to be a particular quality?
Yes, but it doesn't matter as much. So this unit here has a resolution of 64 linear pairs per millimeter. The higher end ones have a resolution of 75-ish linear pairs per millimeter. That's the unit of measurement they use. In this one, you definitely notice that stars are a bit bloated. They're not as pinpoint because they're not resolved as clearly. I wouldn't say that matters as much. You can still get away, and this is the minimum. You can't get anything lower than 64 linear pairs per millimeter, and it's good enough.
Do you have any other questions?
I think I heard someone ask how fragile they are. Yeah. I won't throw it on the ground, but it is designed to be mounted on a gun and taken to war with. So they are pretty resilient. Pretty sure you can go scuba diving with it as well. They are pretty beefy, at least the military grade ones. The astronomy dedicated ones are not waterproof and not designed to be thrown around. Or that.
All right, Bojan, again, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
By the way, you must have some interesting conversations with Jim Thompson.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want this to him.
Okay, thanks again. Okay, you can shout it.
I was hesitant that the imagery being solely green would affect the appeal of the imagery.
couldn't believe what I was able to see at that dark sky site. Is the amount you can see with less gear the appeal, as you're still not seeing the colors of the nebula that you were chasing? Okay, did everyone in the room get that? For people online, the question really boils down to, is the monochrome nature of the amplified images much of a detraction compared to, say, getting the full color image out of a digitally processed filtered version?
If I had a lot more time on my hands and I could take pictures with color, yes. But the fact that I don't need an equatorial mount with tracking, counterweights, driving to a dark site, sitting on the computer more than I already do for my day job, no, it does not detract from it at all. There's still so much to see. And the fact that it's monochrome actually lets you see more detail, because all the details sort of pop. It's all in one color, so you're not at a deficit in some other wavelength of light that your eyes can't process. So for all those reasons, convenience is the biggest one for me. This is a lot easier to drag around than a 12, 14, or Adela's 36-inch scope.
Alrighty, thanks again. Moving along, we are running long. What a surprise. So keep the bio break to 10 minutes this time. Rest of the museum is closed. We will be giving out tickets. So come down and collect your chance to win something in the door prize. And the question, could Northern Hemisphere dinosaurs have possibly seen the star Polaris? And so, yeah, if we until probably the June meeting. So thanks, Malcolm, for your understanding. The trivia question. The answer is that maybe some of the later ones, the fact being that Polaris only ignited about 70 million years ago, makes it a bit of a tight squeeze. And I love that question simply because it gives us it's not a trick question. It's the notion that the stars are not eternal. We're used to the idea that dinosaurs were around. The fact that Polaris was not around, I think, is an unusual twist. So not a trick question. So observations, please. Bob's not here. Is he coming in online? Okay.
Yes. The original discoverer of M102 was Pierre Méchain, who shared the information with Charles Messier, who added it to his now famous Messier list. These guys had no idea what they were looking at. They were unable to differentiate between galaxies, nebula, planetary nebula, or even star clusters. The only way they could identify comets was that the comets moved and all these other things did not. Their main goal was to find comets, and Messier's list was just to identify objects that might be confused with comets. About 2 years after his discovery, Méchain retracted his claim, explaining that he had actually just observed M101 twice. This is actually not very likely because M101 and M102 are 9 degrees apart, and M101 is easy to locate because of its proximity to the Big Dipper. It is way more likely that he just couldn't find M102 again because it's much dimmer than M101. Even today, though, we are not quite sure that this galaxy is the one that was originally discovered as M102. Next image. I imaged this galaxy about 5 nights ago. This is M82, the Cigar Nebula. M82 is about 12 million light years distance. It contains about 30 billion stars. At our next meeting, you're going to be exposed to many fabulous images of the upcoming solar eclipse. It occurred to me that with 30 billion stars in this galaxy, at least one of them was lined up behind its planet when I took this photo. Therefore, I would like to present to you the first solar eclipse image of the year. Next image, please. This galaxy is about 17 million light years from Earth. The name comes from the central region, which does look like a black eye. The central region rotates in the opposite direction to the part of the galaxy outside this region. This counter rotation is probably due to M64 absorbing a nearby galaxy. M64 contains about 100 billion stars. You might ask yourself, why am I not claiming another eclipse photo? The answer is easy. I did not image this galaxy on April the 1st. Next image, please. Every once in a while, actually too often, imaging does not go according to the script. This image demonstrates one of my less successful guiding sessions. What, might you ask, would cause such a bizarre tracking result? Bad tracking is usually clouds or wind. Next slide, please. This was the scene that when I went out the next morning to put away my telescope, I'm going to guess that my telescope was guiding on a snowflake. Next image, please. This is one of the challenge objects. The nebula is a supernova remnant in the constellation Gemini. It is about 5,000 light years from Earth, and the supernova exploded about 30,000 years ago. This nebula is now too large for my camera to capture in one image. This image is actually a two-pane mosaic. The image dividing line goes horizontally about across the middle of the image. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Tony?
Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Today I've got 3 images to share with you, and they're all something of a first for me. First up is M35. This was one of the challenge objects. And this is more or less first light with a new telescope that I got. It's from Starfield Optics, a Canadian company, and it's a little refractor, 300 millimeter focal length. This is about 35 minutes of 30-second exposures. M35 is just at the boot buckle of Gemini. It's the big blue cluster here. The little one here is a long way behind M35 and is much older. Thus, the red and orange colors in the stars compared to the blue colors in M35. This is, again, the Jellyfish Nebula. This is the second of Richard's challenges this month. And this one represents my first step into narrowband imaging. However, I don't yet have a monochrome camera, but I did acquire an H-alpha filter, and I thought I would see what I could get. So this represents some 6 hours of hydrogen alpha exposures, plus a little bit of one-shot color for the stars. I'm missing out on a little bit of depth in the hydrogen, but it's enough to have a little bit of fun until I can fund a monochrome camera. And finally, here's some galaxies in Leo. And this was the first time that I got out to flow and did some imaging. So this was just on, I think, Easter Sunday, last weekend. And very nice night. This is M95, M96, and M105, plus a couple of bonuses. So this is 105, 96, and 95. Got a couple of barred spiral galaxies and a couple of elliptical galaxies. And this was about 2 hours of exposure time at, I think, 5 minutes each. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Got it. Oh.
I have to remember which one is which.
The
Green
green
one
one is
advances,
the go
right?
button.
Yeah, okay. Well, good evening, everyone. I got a few things to share. Some from last month there, we ran into some technical difficulties, so I brought them into this month. This is just an image of the moon I was taking in practice for the solar eclipse, just with one of my small refractors. But I thought I'd show something else that happened at the time last month there. But to kind of show properly, I'm going to give a view from, well, another part of the planet where certain people come from, and they tend to see things upside down like that. Correctly upside down. And so this is the same image just rolled over. But the reason I'm showing this is because what I want to show you is a close-up of the top of the region. And I just found the orientation better than to look at that from the right, our right way, which is downside. Anyway, this is a close-up region. And the reason I want to show you this is very near the South Pole. And I'll bring this up. Last month, in February, the Odysseus lander made it to the moon. First commercial payload to the moon like that. They were trying for a landing near the South Pole, which is indicated there. But unfortunately, the lander did a face plant shortly, during its landing sequence, and it basically tipped over on its side, and lasted for about a week or so. But because of the face plant, its solar panels weren't oriented properly, and it was going to be limited in power. So they were hoping to get to reactivate it once the lunar night passed. The spacecraft itself was only designed to last for a couple of weeks there. They were hoping maybe it would survive the lunar night. But the latest update, which I actually just got a hold of yesterday, saying that they have actually turned it off. The face planted lander is still down there, but it is no longer with us. It's not communicating. So that's the Odysseus landing site. It was at actually about 300 kilometers from the lunar South Pole. And you can see the crater in the foreground, Mauritius. It's 110 kilometers in diameter, and you can see the effects of foreshortening when you're looking at something so close to the limb of the moon there. So 300 kilometers from Odysseus landing site to the South Pole, and Mauritius, which is a very circular crater, is also distorted by that foreshortening effect. So very difficult to image things in great and fine detail up near the pole there. But when the conditions are right, you do get some nice shadows there, and you can see a lot of the topography. So Odysseus is no longer with us, but at least it was a successful mission, at least in part. All right. So this next one, this is an object that Oscar put forward as a challenge object back in December. And I thought I'd like to image that because I'd never seen this, but I think Oscar was being, I don't know. Yeah, Oscar was being playful. Let's put it that way, because
Knew he was on his way out.
that's right too. He had nothing to lose, right? MAFI 1 was the challenge object, and this is an interesting galaxy because it's actually quite close to us, just under 10 million light years from us, and it's
it is quite a bright object if you were looking at it not from within the Milky Way. Maffei-1 and its companion, which was also discovered by the same Italian astronomer Paolo Maffei in the late 60s, they're in what we call the zone of avoidance. As you can see from this projection, they're right in the plane of the Milky Way. And the Milky Way has a lot of stars and a lot of dust in it, and they really tend to obscure your view of anything that's beyond the Milky Way in that direction. So it's that area is called the zone of avoidance, but some people look at it anyway. And Paolo Maffei, he did this in the late 60s and discovered this galaxy. I'm going to show you. There we go. I did a view with my telescope of this region, which captures both Maffei-1 and Maffei-2. You can see here, and it's a spectacular image, don't you think? Yeah. Where are the galaxies? Where are they, right? Really difficult to see. In fact, the light from these galaxies is obscured, especially with Maffei-2, which you can barely see. Well, here, I'll help you out here. There we go. They're obscured by on the order of 99%. So there's just not a lot of light coming through, but these are actually reasonably sized galaxies. If they were beyond the plane of the Milky Way, they'd be amongst the 10 brightest galaxies that we can see from here. They'd be well known as some of the galaxies that you just saw from Bob's images, and they would be very bright. But because they're in this zone, a lot of their light is just basically absorbed by the gas and the dust and the stars. So this is a close-up I took of Maffei-1. We know this is to be a relatively large elliptical galaxy, kind of easier to discern the details. And this was Oscar's challenge object. So you can only see this Oscar with a 12 to 14-inch telescope at a minimum under really dark skies. So it is a challenge. It was your most challenging object there. But so this is a standard view that I took with just my 11-inch telescope and the ASI 294 MCE Pro camera, and I was able to do a 2-hour burn on it and pick up some of the light from there. But this is ordinarily it would be an 11th magnitude galaxy, but as I say, there's just a lot of obscuration. What really interested me when I was reading about this was the other one that he discovered, which he discovered about a year later, which is Maffei-2, which is an even more challenging object. And that's it there. Fascinating, eh? Isn't it beautiful? You can just make out the core of this galaxy. This is a 16th magnitude galaxy, and again, obscured by at least 5 orders of magnitude behind all that dust and the countless stars in that. So this is an LRGB image that I took with my 11-inch and an ASI 2600 Pro. And you can just, as I say, pick up the nucleus there. So almost in conjunction with some of the talk we heard tonight about IR pass filters and that, what I decided to do is use a filter, same one actually I used on some of my lunar images, which is an IR pass filter. So we're looking at capturing light that's beyond what we see with our eyes. But those longer wavelengths of the infrared light can penetrate that dust more readily. This is what James Webb Telescope does. It sees in the infrared. It doesn't see in the visible. So I took that filter, that IR pass filter, actually used 2 of them, 685 nanometers and 742 nanometers. So this is we don't see this stuff at all. And I tried the same image of this object with that filter. And I was really surprised by how effective that was. So this is visual light, where you can just barely make this. And this is with the IR pass filter. So you can start to see some of the details. You can certainly see the core of the galaxy more readily, and you can start to see details of the spiral arms. So quite an impressive filter. I think I'll play with this a little bit more on some other objects that we are known to be IR bright. So that's Maffei-2. Last image I have for you is this guy. This is the comet that Mick mentioned, which will actually be visible. Well, it'll be in the sky very close to Jupiter, and it is brightening. It's coming close to its perihelion approach in a couple of weeks. It's just at naked, it's just around naked eye visibility now. It's estimates I've seen lately are around 5.5, which under a really dark sky is something that you might be able to make. I photographed this on Monday with a 280 millimeter telephoto lens and Canon RP camera. This is a combined exposure of 30 minutes. It's a really pretty comet. The tail length is about at least 3 degrees from what I could measure on my images. And the bright object beside it is the brightest star in constellation Aries. That's Hamel. So that's something for those of you that are going to be in the zone of totality. If you get a clear sky and if you think of it, you're not too distracted by the wonder of the eclipse there. This is going to be very close to Jupiter, and there's a chance that if it's brightened up at all, you might actually see a wisp of it near Jupiter during the time of totality. So just something to keep in mind. Thank you very much. I wish you all clear skies wherever you're going to watch the eclipse from, and stay safe.
Thank you, Paul. As always. Okay, and Richard's got his own presentations, and then we'll lead into next month's challenges.
Okay, some of you may have seen me after the last meeting going out to the front parking lot and setting up my camera on a tripod so that I could capture the constellation challenge for the month, which was Gemini. So this is what I got that evening. This is just a single JPEG picture straight from the camera. The only post-processing was to add the lines onto the constellation and the marking for M35. But just with that simple single exposure of 10 seconds at ISO 2500, I managed to get stars all the way down to about magnitude 7.5. There was a bit of a problem with the parking lot lights. And so I actually had to hold up my hand beside the lens to shade it a little bit. And that resulted in a sort of a pink glow down that side, which was my hand lit up by the street lights. Anyway, just to give you an idea of what you can do with just a simple camera on tripod approach, you can certainly catch most of the constellations quite easily, and stars at least as good as your eyes could see even in a dark site. So I encourage you to try out some of the constellation challenges. This is M35, the shoe buckle cluster. I didn't orient my camera right and move the thing over to get that little NGC cluster in the same frame, unfortunately. So, but this is just the shoe buckle cluster, M35. This is from my backyard. Let's see. This was with my William Optics refractor on a tracking mount, and it was 37 30-second exposures with a gain of 100 on my color camera. I haven't seen anybody else take this one yet. This is the other challenge object, the level 2 challenge, which was the Caldwell number 39, the Clown Face Nebula. And because it's a planetary nebula, it's small but fairly bright. And so I decided to use some of the planetary techniques on it, which meant I used my big telescope, the 8-inch Celestron, focal length of 2000 millimeters, 2 meters, and took a whole bunch of really short exposures. So this is a stack of 215 exposures, each of which was 10 seconds long. And that technique allowed me to select just the best ones and then do a lot of sharpening on the image afterwards. So you can see a lot of the features, and it's quite fun to see the clown's face with his bright nose and his mouth here. So I was very happy with the way that one turned out. And then I went out to FLO on Easter Sunday, and it was a lovely night, but my guiding went wrong. I sympathize with Bob Olson on that. I don't know what went wrong. It just wasn't working at all. So I didn't get the extent of exposures that I'd hoped. I had to leave in the one with the satellite track across it, as you see. This is only 3 exposures of 5 minutes each. But I did catch the jellyfish, not so much of his tentacles, but certainly the top of it. And then I also was practicing, as many of the others were, on solar photography. We were treated to a beautiful set of sunspots earlier in the month. This is March the 24th. So there was a beautiful big cluster of sunspots going across the center of the sun. It was just glorious to watch. And of course, I tried the various exposures and tried to make sure I got the focusing all right. This is a selection of frames from a video. No, I'm sorry. This is not a video. This is just a single 1/2000th of a second exposure. So I was using the Canon camera on the telescope. And the same day, I had my great niece over to visit and gave her a pair of Eclipse glasses. We tried them out, and she said, "Oh, I can see the sunspot with my eye." Now, my old eyes can't do it, but young guys, a 10-year-old could certainly see that sunspot cluster just using Eclipse glasses. And then there was Comet Pons Brooks. I had a nice view across the schoolyard of W.E. Gowling, great view to the west. And it was kind of tricky to catch the tail because there's a lot of light pollution in that direction for me. But it's a lovely comet, as people have said, and the tail keeps changing from day to day. So those are my observations. And I managed to hit all of the observing challenges, but not surprising since I made them up. However, I was very happy to see quite a number of other people posting on the Discord server. Tony Jarrett was very prompt with his observation of M35. We also had a couple of phone pictures from Heather Dillon and Nicole McRae. Nicole is a very new member. Andrea had sunspot pictures. Bojan had another sunspot visual observation. And Jim Thompson recently posted some pictures of the sunspots in hydrogen alpha light. So gold stars for everybody who participated in this month's observing challenges. Now, for this month coming up, we have a different constellation. This is the constellation that was from the culture of the Yellowknives Dene people. And there have certainly been other big bears around the Big Dipper, but this is a different way of seeing it. Instead of having a bear, we have the bowl of the Big Dipper is the chest of a person. And the handle is the spine. And according to the legend, the traveler was being shot in the back. So that's why his back is arched like that and throwing up his hands in despair because he's been caught and shot. So he's now in the sky. I saw 2 different names for this constellation, Yamuasa or Yeda. I'm not sure how to pronounce those exactly. But they both have the same characteristic of being a very, very large constellation and stretching through the Big Dipper and on either side of it as well, with the legs going down towards the east and the arms outstretched up towards the west. So see if you can see this constellation. You probably need a dark sky to be able to see all of the fainter stars, or this picture is taken right from my front yard with street lights lighting up the trees around it. And once again, with the cameras that we have these days, you can pick up a lot of very faint stars, even from the city. So give this one a try. See if you can see a different culture's constellation. For the second level constellation, Sky and Telescope magazine pointed out there's another different culture's idea of how these stars make a pattern. And this is the springs of the gazelle, or also known as pronking, when the little gazelles leap around and leave their footprints. And there are 3 sets of footprints. There, there, and there. These are certainly visible in binoculars, even from Ottawa. So see if you can find those 3 pairs of stars that mark the springs of the gazelle. And if you want to go on from there, there's also a different way of looking at this cluster of stars as being the outline of a pond, and a group of stars here and here, which might be the rest of the herd of the gazelles. For the level 3 challenge, you will need a telescope, but it's a lovely galaxy just under the bowl of the Big Dipper, M108. It's also known as the surfboard galaxy. It's an edge-on spiral with a lot of complicated dust lanes. So see if you can see that, maybe take a photograph of it if you can. And then even more challenging is another galaxy, NGC 2841, known as the Tiger's Eye Galaxy. It's a galaxy in somewhat the same orientation as the Andromeda Galaxy, but much smaller and fainter. It has a lot of interesting detail. It does look like a tiger's eye. So those are your challenges in this constellation of Yeda for this month. And of course, the solar system challenge is the eclipse. Well, maybe not. This is a picture that I took back in 1998, and I mentioned briefly that I'd been trying some processing techniques, and I was quite happy with the way it came out. But we did notice in the sky at the same time Venus and Jupiter. They won't be quite as close to the sun this time around, but certainly you should be able to see them with your eye if you're looking up at the sky from a totality region. And of course, there's still the ongoing challenge of waiting for the blaze star. We heard about a lot about that last month. I won't go into that in detail, but do keep looking at Corona Borealis. Thank you.
Righty, thank you, Richard. So tentative schedule for next month, basically dedicated to the eclipse and reports coming from as far afield as Mexico, as well as locally. So we'll have some material in backup just in case everybody's cameras fails and that cloud's over and the sacrifice later hasn't worked as far as the weather gods are concerned. There'll of course be Ottawa skies for the month from Dave, but otherwise all hands on deck for eclipse reporting. Estelle's pick of the month, double stars for small telescopes. You can find out more about that, as I say, at the back behind the curtain with the wizard at the end of the meeting. Fred Lossing Observatory, members only. We also have members only Star Party events out there, the next of which is tomorrow. Okay, so stand by for more information from Gordon. List of contacts, mostly familiar names for you. Audience tonight, 53 locally and 43 on Zoom. Again, not bad, nearly 100. Thanks to all our speakers, organisers, Chris up in the booth there. Also thanks to the staff here at Chasm and to the RASC National Office who provide the Zoom service for us. All comments, critiques, complaints and ideas to me, meeting chair at ottawa.rasc.ca, or pop them in on the Discord. After the fun and games, post-meeting entertainment at Liam Maguire's up on St. Laurent Boulevard. Good good food, good drinks, good company. And so next meeting, Friday, May 3rd, same place, plus Zoom. Before leaving, I would like a round of applause and thanks for this young man who is the runner around with the microphone and the giver out of tickets. Anthony, thank you. Okay, so that's it. We'll be doing draws for the door prize right now. There's also the giveaways table here. Come and check out what's available, and we'll see you next month. Cheers.